Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to listen to Just Add Power. Talk about little HDMI video distribution over IP. So some of the things that makes Just Add Power unique, we're going to talk about tonight. The feature sets, the different parts that make up Just Add Power, and building a system, configuring and controlling a system, and how to control it with what control systems. And finally, discuss a little bit about firmware for the Just Add Power devices. So what makes Just Add Power unique? Well, Just Add Power has been in business now over 26, 27 years. And like to consider themselves an HDMI distribution product without limits. What does that mean? Well, limitless HDMI distribution. Limitless. Well, we all know what a black box matrix has and the issues that are associated with a black box matrix. 4x4, 6x6, 8x8, various sizes, always a multiple of 4 or multiple of 2 somehow, some way. We're always trying to figure out a way to either maximize it or try and get under a certain size to fit a customer's needs. Well, with Just Add Power, that's not a problem. It's practically limitless. So with that, we can do a 2x9, 7x4, 12x18, 11x8, 13x56. Typically with a black box matrix, that would have to be a 32x64 matrix. But now we're only working with 13 sources. So we're not having to waste a bunch of money. How big can we go? Ultimately 4,000 sources by 65,000 displays. Size is not an issue, so we like to call it limitless. So any size to any amount of displays, or any amount of sources to any amount of displays. Distance choices, no maximum. There's some maximum depending upon what type of means we're using to move that, but ultimately length is not much of a problem for Just Add Power. Whereas a black box matrix, it is. We're limited to what that cat can do, typically 100 meters at best. And sometimes that starts to push it with the limitations of what you can do with HD-based T. Ultimately, we can convert from a cat and go miles across fiber with Just Add Power. So we can do some really, really large systems. Instant switching. One of the cool features of Just Add Power is that we have the ability to switch in between sources within a single frame. We've all seen it when we have an AVR and we're switching from an Apple TV to DirecTV or something along those lines, and we're standing there next to the customer and we're switching back and forth, and we switch from the Apple TV to the DirecTV, and what happens? Well, there's a 5-second blank of black space that the customer starts to stare at you, waiting for that other source to come up. Well, with Just Add Power, that's not a problem. Here, we could see that when a source changes, it instantly appears. There's no black screen of death. We're not waiting for some type of handshake to happen. It just changes. So one of the great things about Just Add Power is that it also works across standard data lines, Cat5e, Cat6, Cat6a. It doesn't need to be shielded. As long as it's gigabit speed capable, we can work. We can use patch panels, keystones, wall plates, couplers if need be. We can work going across the network. Other devices out there, anything that's using an HD-based T, they have special pinouts, will require Cat6a shielding, various things along those lines. With Just Add Power, that's not a problem. It works. So some of the cool features that set Just Add Power apart from other video distribution systems that are out on the market, one would be video walls. We have the ability to do a video wall built into each receiver. Not necessarily something that's needed for every application of a video distribution system, but the capabilities built into it. So here we see a little 3 across by 3 down video wall. Within that video wall, we have the ability to adjust for bezel and gap compensation based off of the size of the screen. If it is an older screen that has a 1-inch bezel, we can adjust for that. If it is a newer display or designed for video walls, we can work with that also. But we have that capability built into the interface of the devices. So here's a great example of a video wall. This was done in early 2015. This is at the Cincinnati Reds stadium, and this is at the, I believe it's called the Horseshoe handlebar bar, or horseshoe bar. But obviously this is a 6 across by 3 down video wall, 18 displays, all using the 2G 1080p product. This here is going through different formats of what you can do with the video wall. All done on the fly, and each one of those can have a different source going to that display. And here it's now showing just 18 displays. So
you can do that in different modes.
Correct. You could do that in different modes built into the program, and set that up through the control system, how to manipulate and create that video wall. That video wall is managed by the bartender that's there, and they have an interface with those different modes, and he can select what source to go to those. So here's another image of that video wall. Again, it won an award from Commercial Integrator for 2015, Best Bar and Restaurant. Very cool, it just blows me away with what they've done with that. So here's another example of that. During construction, there's actually 3 video walls there. These are the other 2. They've wrapped the pillars with displays on 3 sides of the pillars and doing a video wall around those pillars in that location. So here is the first baseline for the Cincinnati Reds. I believe this is club level, and just as they were finishing up the installation for this project. So really, really cool system. Again, this was done back in 2015. Since then, we have even more very cool video wall installations all across the country and around the world with Just Add Power. So love this video. Shows off what you can do with it, but they leave a 10-foot ladder in the middle of their showing off what they're doing at the end. So don't leave a ladder in the middle of what you're showing off. Finally, one more picture of the bar during a game. So really, really cool of what you can do with that. In addition to the standard video wall, Just Add Power has the ability to do portrait video walls. We can rotate the object, the screen, 90, 180, 270 degrees within the receivers, so allowing for portrait video wall. In addition to portrait video wall, we can do some cool things of having combinations of portrait and landscape, so making a mosaic video wall. Just really, really cool what you can do. And again, this is being done within the Just Add Power receivers. So neat video here. If you ever have the time to come up and visit Jerry's World, the new Star location in Dallas, this is one of 4 locations, 4 properties that have been done, or 4, bar venues, restaurants that have been done with Just Add Power at the Star. This one here is extremely impressive that there's 24 displays hanging over this bar. This is called the Concrete Cowboy up in Frisco, Texas, done by an integrator out of Dallas. Fantastic integrator. And as you can see, there are video walls all around this location. And what they've done with this. This one is powered by RTI. Great case study done with Just Add Power and RTI at this location. So as you can see, this was done during construction. There's another 3x3 video wall over there, and I believe a 4x2 out on the patio. And again, it's one of 4 locations at the Star, done by 3 different integrators. So, but fantastic work here. So some really, really cool size systems you can do with Just Add Power and the video walls. So another feature that Just Add Power has built into the devices is called Image Pool. This allows us to take a snapshot of what's on a receiver or a transmitter and put it onto the control system. So here we have a Control 4 interface on the left, RTI interface here, and we're taking a snapshot of what's on a display and putting it on the control system. It's enough information. You're not going to watch the movie, you're not going to watch the show, but it's enough to know what is being watched in that location. Anywhere, depending upon the control system, from 3 to 10 frames per second. But it's very powerful, really cool to see what Johnny's watching in his room when mom and dad don't have to get out of bed to watch it. So really, really cool feature. It's called Image Pool. Another feature called Image Push. This allows us to store an image onto a receiver. If a source stops transmitting data, the receiver will see that, hold on to the last frame of the video that it was showing, and then waits about 3-4 seconds, and then flips over to an image that's loaded by the integrator, or can show some form of, some form of slideshow onto those receivers on that location. So great for commercial applications where that display is in a location to make money. If the source fails, there's some form of advertising that can be put on that location. Also, integrators can put their logo on it. If you see this image, please call. Can have the number to their help desk. Another cool feature built into the Just Add Power pieces. Here we see Image Pop. This is available in the 3G product, where we can take another image, a logo, or some form of marketing, and load that and overlay that on the video and have the control system turn it on and off. We can make it where it's automated with a certain amount of time with the use of a control system, but here you can see the Buffalo Wild Wings logo on top of the video. Another cool thing is that we do not have to have sources all in a rack when doing video distribution. They could be in multiple locations, decentralized. So you can have a transmitter and a Blu-ray player out in the living room where it's easily accessible instead of having to walk back to the rack and put a Blu-ray into the rack to make it be on the system like other video distribution, like a black box matrix. You can have that Blu-ray player out here where it's easy, everyone can use. And that Blu-ray player would be accessible to wherever we want to send that video across the Just Add Power. Long distance, we can send video across from a transmitter and a receiver. They can be used as just a set of balins. So if you have integrators that have issues with sending an HDR signal, a 4K HDR signal from one point to another, and they have to make sure it gets there, use Just Add Power. It will work with 4K HDR. If we want to go really long distance, we can stack switches. We can, depending upon the type of switch, up to 16 switches and link them via fiber uplinks and go really, really long distance. This is used actually quite often in some larger homes out there where they have a main house, they have a pool house, they may have some stables, and they want to send video to all those locations. Well, you have a switch in the main house, have a switch in the pool house, run a piece of fiber in between the two, and those would act as one massive matrix. We could have sources on both sides and receivers on both sides. And again, the customer doesn't know that it's in two different locations. They just know it's one massive switch. So can do some really, really cool stuff and do some very, very large systems with Just Add Power. USB 2.0 over IP. These are real-world working USB ports. So if you have a client that wants to send a keyboard and mouse and put a Mac Mini in their rack. They can view their emails in their master bedroom, their office, a study, something along those lines. You can have a keyboard and a mouse with a little wireless dongle plugged into the receiver port on the receiver and send that information back to a Mac Mini that's in the rack. And then have another receiver in another location with another keyboard and mouse, and those could communicate back and forth. So you could distribute that. That's available on the 3G plus devices, the AVP and the Hi-Fi. And I'll talk more about those individual devices here shortly. In addition to a keyboard and mouse, you can even do touchscreens. So here is a Nike flagship location. I believe this one's in Miami Beach, all done with Just Add Power. So here you have these Nike touchscreens where a customer can customize and order their custom shoes from that location, and then those shoes be delivered, but it's all through a touchscreen. Here in Houston, there's a museum, I believe, that's done with Just Add Power. I know out in West Texas, there is the Texas State Petroleum Museum. Phenomenal job done with approximately 40 Mac Minis, touchscreens, really cool interactive experience, all powered with Elio touchscreens and Just Add Power and Mac Minis, moving that content around there. If you ever get the chance to go to Midland, Odessa, or Midland/Odessa, they're two separate, but it's all pretty much the same. Very cool interface. So we can put an on-screen display, text on the screen. So you can type text strings into it and have that show up on the screen. Volume control, mute on, Johnny do your homework, that can be done through the control system onto the display. Again, another feature that a basic black box matrix does not have. Cec Control. So this is where we start to get into some more interactive experience with the devices. On our Plus product, the 3G Plus, the 2G Plus Omega devices have the ability to do CEC. CEC is the ability to send control commands through the HDMI cable. This is fantastic for the fact that if you see video, you know your control system's connected. So you can send commands through RTI, Control 4, Savant, any of those have that capability of turning a display on, turning a source on through just sending the command through the HDMI. Works great. Only problem is matter of making sure that the display has the ability to accept CEC. CEC is found on approximately 50% of the displays. Usually the upper end displays have CEC capabilities. We're seeing it more and more, CEC capabilities come to the lower displays, but it's available. And that's available on the Plus products. So next is RS-232 commands. The ability to control the devices via RS-232. Here we're showing the old DB9 connection, and on our older 2G product, we did have DB9 connections, but since then we've moved to the mini connection, mini 8 connection for RS-232. It is both one-way and bidirectional, so if need be, I can pull the information of the status of the projector off the RS-232 and put it on the control system. You have different ways to set up that RS-232, so if you just want to send a blanket power on command to all the devices, you can, or you can have an interactive single point control point to the receiver to a specific device. So many capabilities. Finally, we've had the request to add IR to devices, and we are taking IR back to the 80s. We came out with the Flux capacitor. So this allows us to send IR across the system and control devices, obviously from an IR flasher. This is an add-on piece that plugs into the RS-232 port on the transmitters and receivers. And Essentially allows you to add IR to any of the devices if you want IR control. So the beauty of this is all going across a single CAT. The audio video, the USB, video wall capabilities, the different types of control is all going across a single CAT to that one location. Next, we're going to talk about the 3G AVP and how this works with audio de-embedding and what we can do with the signal coming in from the HDMI. So this piece here is the 3G Plus AVP. This has a mic level in, a line level in, and also takes in the audio from the HDMI. And we have full control of those three different sources of audio. We can de-embed a Dolby Digital chip or signal coming into that and output that to a 2-channel stereo at the head end, at that source. We also have the control of that if we wanted to add a microphone into the system or an audio feed into the system. We can control that mix, and that mix comes across or comes out of that stereo output of the transmitter. We also can send that mix across the Just Add Power network and have that mix come out of the display's speakers. Very, very cool piece. This does not handle Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. So if you have a need for working with that, this is not something that you want to mix into the system. We have another solution. This is the 3G Plus Hi-Fi unit. This has an HDMI in and an HDMI out and will pass all lossless audio formats. So if you're connecting it to an Ultra HD Blu-ray player or to a DirecTV box or to an Xfinity One box that have the ability to receive Dolby Digital, DTS:X, Dolby Atmos, this is one of the transmitters that you want to use for that. But if that is essential to your install, you do not want to use the AVP transmitter. AVP transmitter will limit and not pass those lossless audio formats through it. So one of the another great features that makes Just Add Power so powerful for video distribution is that we run into problems where systems are not always brand new. A lot of customers will take older TVs with them, they build new houses, they move. There's always a mix of televisions. Just read a statistic today that only 9% of the televisions that are out there now are 4K televisions. That's as of today. There's a lot of room to grow the 4K market. So that means 91% of the televisions out on the market are not 4K. Well, that's a problem when you're dealing with a black box matrix that doesn't have scaling. All the Just Add Power receivers have scaling. So what does that allow us to do? We can send 4K content from an HD Ultra Blu-ray player or a 4K Apple TV or a Roku 4K to any display on the system. We can downscale it from 4K to 1080p or 720p. Can't do that with a standard black box matrix. If you try and send 4K to a 1080p display, you're going to get some type of error on the display. This is also an issue just in general with a mom factor or a wife factor that wants a kitchen or a TV in the kitchen. Well, a 4K display, the smallest 4K display that's out on the market currently, is about a 39-inch display. Well, that doesn't necessarily gonna fit on the kitchen counter. So what do? You gotta put a 32-inch, something smaller that's only a 1080p display. Well, again, that becomes a problem. Dad's watching 4K out in the living room, someone turns something on in the kitchen, it will, with a standard black box matrix, go to the lowest common denominator EDID and now send 1080p to that living room TV and 1080p to the kitchen TV. With Just Add Power, that's not a problem. So
The receiver does the scaling.
the receiver does the scaling. On all the 3G product, there's a scaler built into each receiver. One of the great things too is that for a long time now, what was it, 2015, Sony announced 4K HDR support. The following summer, Just Add Power had a firmware update and enabled 4K HDR support. So we can do HDR 4K with Just Add Power. There are a couple Bezel out there now that claim it to 100 meters, and some are iffy at best. But yes, not a problem with Just Add Power, and we've been doing it for a very long time now. So almost 2 years. Well, no, 2 years now. So these are new. Plug, Play, Present. Again, one of the great features about Just Add Power is that it's firmware upgradable. And we are always constantly evolving and adding new features via firmware for free. So here we are showing a couple of the different transmitters. We have 2 in-wall transmitters and our 2 3G Plus transmitters here, where it allows us to take a setup of having a transmitter and a receiver behind the display. We plug a source into that transmitter, and we have the ability, without a control system, of powering on that display. And if that display was on another source before I plugged that MacBook in, it would switch that from that original source to that MacBook. This is called Plug, Play, Present. So very, very cool feature. This is set up with using the interface of the Just Add Power devices for setting up the Plug, Play, Present. Here we're showing it at a conference room, switching control. So here the displays are showing the Hilton image. Someone walks up to the podium, plugs their MacBook in there, and it switches automatically over to those. No control system needed. This is all done within the Just Add Power, can be set up there. So very, very cool feature. Again, another free firmware update to enable this. So here are the transmitters that are available through Just Add Power. So this is a rack-mounted 3-in-1 transmitter. This is essentially 3 3G plus AVP transmitters in a 1U rack shelf. Pictures showing you the front and then the back. So it is a 1U rack shelf, has active cooling, big power, enterprise power supply, works fantastic, has all the ports for microphone, line in, line out, USB, and so on. Very common in commercial applications. See it some in residential applications, but again, this suffers from the Dolby Pro Logic and Dolby Atmos DTS:X lossless audio issues. So instead of using this one for residential, you can use the new 747 PoE 3G 4-in-1. So this is essentially 4 transmitters in a 1U rack shelf, active cooling. And then this is pretty neat too, is that this is both PoE powered and regular power supply powered. So you have the option of how you want to use the power on this. And this will handle all lossless audio formats. So this will pass Dolby Atmos, this will pass DTS:X, this will do Dolby Digital, no problem. The only thing this does not do, well, a couple things, is doesn't have USB capabilities, does not have CEC capabilities, and doesn't do the audio de-embedding. But this, in a residential system where they're dealing with AVRs and want a 5.1 or 7.1 surround sound system, this is the go-to. Just to give you an idea, here's some of the systems rack mounted. One on the right is one of the ones at the Cincinnati Reds Stadium. That one is all using the 2G. It's been in there, I want to say they've been working on that and continuing to grow what's at the stadium for about 6 years now. I believe they're above 100 sources to almost 500 displays at the for Just Add Power at the Cincinnati Reds Stadium. Here is the individual transmitters. This is the 718, the one with the AVP, the ability to do the de-embedding. Again, with the de-embedding, does not pass the lossless audio formats. This is imperative. We have a lot of dealers that get this, they want the best, but don't necessarily need these features, and then it suffers when they want to pass a Blu-ray or get that Atmos signal through it. So we have the 717 Hi-Fi transmitter. This has HDMI pass-through for it and will pass the lossless audio formats through it. This one was the answer after the AVP came out, but we have now, this has pretty much become the workhorse for the residential side of transmitters. Again, this one doesn't have CEC capabilities, does not do USB, and does not do audio de-embedding. But this is a much smaller footprint, less expensive to the dealer, and will pass all the lossless audio formats. This is the one for building a small residential or even a large residential, and can be used in commercial applications. But this is the workhorse transmitter. About the size of a deck of cards, and they're all PoE powered. All the 3G are PoE powered. So here is the in-wall gang wall plate 2G, the 717 WP2 3G plus 2-gang wall plate transmitter. As you can see here, 2-gang wall plate, available in white and black that we keep in stock, and then available in 11 different other colors. Just remember time frame on if you do need the custom 11 colors, it takes an extra about 2 weeks lead time. But what's really cool about this is it has an HDMI in and a VGA in. So great for a boardroom, a conference room, something along those lines where they're not sure what's going to be plugging into it, and they have both the HDMI and the VGA capabilities in it. Next, we have the 718 WP4. So this is a 4-gang version, but this has a couple more things. It has an HDMI out. In addition, it has the audio de-embedding. So if we need to strip the audio from the HDMI, we can. We also have a mic level in and a line level in on this one. Adds a little bit more cost to it versus the 2-gang, but works great. So the 3G receivers. So we have 2 receivers. The 518 AVP. This has all the bells and whistles on it, USB, CEC capability, and the de-embedding. But this is not a problem as the transmitter in how it handles audio de-embedding with this. But if you're looking to do USB control or control devices via CEC, this is the receiver to use. All the receivers have the scaler. The 3G receivers have the scaler for scaling from 4K down to 1080p or 720p. And honestly, the scaling list is extremely extensive. You can scale it to, I believe, even 480p if need be, and some other resolutions for older projectors. But it can do some really cool stuff. Then next, this is the 508 PoE. As you can see, it's just a 3G. So it doesn't have a plus. So no CEC, no USB, no audio de-embedding. But we'll pass all the lossless audio formats through it. We'll do RS-232, does the scaling and so on. And again, this is the workhorse. This is what's sold the most out there. It's really what features you need for a system. But again, PoE powered, great little piece. Next, this is the 2G Omega series. So prior to the 3G product that does 4K and the 1080p and the scaling, we had our 2G 1080p only product. Well, that has changed and gone away and been upgraded to work with the 3G product. But this also works with the older 2G product. But this has a limitation. It only does 1080p. We'll never go above 1080p. That's it. So for most new installs, residential want to be selling the 3G product. For locations, sometimes sports bars that don't care about 4K now, the 2G Omega is the solution because they're looking only for 1080p. But times are changing. So here, again, it works with the old legacy gear, but again, maximum is 1080p. So we have the 2G Omega, and then we have the 2G Omega Plus. So it has the USB capabilities, de-embedding, and so on. Some of the different ones there. Finally, we have a 716 VGA transmitter. This is a standalone VGA transmitter for those of us that are still stuck with working with VGA. If they need to, we have that ability. Works with both the 2G Omega and also the 3G systems. So, accessories. We have a 1U rack shelf that allows you to store 13 devices on their edge in a rack. So here you can see a mixture of 2G and 3G devices. If you're working with the Plus series devices, it's going to use up about 5U of the rack shelf. If you're only working with like 3G transmitters, it's going to use a little bit more than 3U on there. Just want to leave something across, like a blank across the top because of the fins of the devices. But it's a very easy way to organize and save a bit, value engineer a system using a 1U rack shelf. Relatively inexpensive. Also, really cool thing found out was works great with DirecTV H25s. If you place them up this way, fits perfectly in there. Take another Just Add Power rack shelf, put it on top, and it will lock those in. And it's about half the cost of the Middle Atlantic DirecTV rack shelf. So a couple different things what it can do. Next here is the Flux capacitor IR dongle. Comes with all the necessary cables and IR flasher with this. So it comes with the communication cable for the RS-232. It gets power from USB. So if you're working with a 3G plus device that has USB, you can get the power to power this from that receiver or transmitter. Or most displays now have USB ports on them with a 5-volt power supply. You could plug that in and into the back of the display and it powers it up. And then finally it comes with the IR flasher for controlling the device. So this is cool. This is the Tyler, the 3G plus 4 plus Tyler. This is essentially 4 virtual receivers and 1 transmitter connected to a tiling processor. What this allows us to do is take any of the sources that are on the Just Add Power system. Let's say you have 7 sources and you want to make a tiled image. The opposite of a video wall. We want to put multiple sources on one display. I can select any 4 of my sources, send them into the tiler, create a tiled image, and then output that as a source back on the system. This is important because why? Most tilers and processors that are available on systems are for a single room. Can only be outputted to that one location. This makes it another source, so any display on the Just Add Power system can see the tiler. So if we wanted to show 4 football games at one time in the kitchen, the living room, and the patio, it's the same source. And it has a couple different templates. So here in the upper left, we have 1 large and then 3 vertical. Here on the right, upper right, we have 1 vertical, 1 large vertical, and then 3 across the bottom. We have a quad capability, and then also a customized capability, where you can specify the size of each window and then how they're layered, the Z depth of those videos. So you can have picture-in-picture within each other. So here's a cool little video of the tiler at work. Here we're showing the quad, and that little green frame that came up around the upper left-hand image means what audio is selected of the 4 sources. Here we switched it to 1 large and 3 across the bottom, and the audio for the top one has been selected. Next, 1 large on the left, that one's selected, and then 3 vertical. And in a moment here, you'll see another cool thing that we can do with it. Here we have 3 images in portrait mode on one display. When they rotate the display here in a moment, cool solution for putting a display in a portrait and now showing 3 different scenes. So on top of that, you can do some even more fun stuff. 4 sources on one display not enough for you? That's fine. Add another tiler. Here we're showing 7 sources because we have 2 tilers. We're taking the first one here with the quad image and then outputting that as a source. On the next tiler, we have that tiler in 1 large and 3 vertical. We take our first tiler, put that into the large, and then 3 more sources on the right-hand side. So we're showing 7 sources on one display. We don't have to stop there. If we want to add 10 sources, add another tiler. You want to go to 13, add another tiler. 5 tilers will get you 16 sources. We can keep going. So it's really just a matter of how big of network switching you're going to want to work with. So switches. What switches work with the system? Here we have the Luxel ones. The 1208, 2624, 4424. It's the 4424 that becomes interesting in the fact that it's stackable. So we can have multiple 4424s in a system and grow the size of that system up to 368 devices on the system. Just last week, I was at a project in West Dallas where we had 3 4424s in the system. They had 2 in one rack and another one in a trophy room about 300 feet, 400 feet away, connected via fiber for some more displays and another source over in that location. So we can grow that system, and it's a seamless video matrix for that. The 5248 and the 7048, 5248 is 48 ports PoE. The 7048 is the big brother to the 4424. It is 52 ports. That can be, as you can see here, 784 devices. The Cisco SG300 and the SG500 are still used and supported, but honestly, they are a much older and slower switch, still used, but all the Luxel switches are about 8 times faster and much more PoE powerful and less expensive than the Cisco switches. Luxel just works great with them. Like I said, 8 times faster really makes a difference in how they're used in rebooting times and so on. Configuration. Just Add Power has software for configuring the devices. And very simple, easy to use. It's downloadable off of the justaddpower.com/support website to download there. Needs a Windows operating system to run. And here it's essentially 3 buttons for configuring a system. I'm briefly going to go step through this just to give you an idea of what it looks like, what the integrator needs to do to set it up. Here we have the first screen. Network interface is the IP address, your network card within the PC. You do need a USB to serial adapter for your PC unless you have a very old PC that has a serial adapter in it. But for the most part, no one does anymore. So you need a USB to serial adapter for that. And then you select what family switch you're working with. If it's a 4424, if it's a 2624, 1208, you select it from the drag down box. the username and password are automatically updated into that. I'm gonna kind of skip through some of this here. Next page asks you how many devices are you working with? How many sources, how many displays in the system? So you specify how many transmitters. Next, you tell it how many receivers in the system. What the default transmitter should be when the system power cycles. When it power cycles, it's all going to come back up to the same source through setting it up through Just Add Power or through the Jad Config software. I recommend this to be put onto a source that is a PG rated source. What happens? Lightning strikes, house goes out, comes back up. If mom and dad were watching Game of Thrones in the bedroom, now everybody's watching Game of Thrones in the bedroom. So just be aware, make it on a PG rated source. Next, you determine and set an IP address of that Luxel switch for the Just Add Power. Where do you want that to sit on the network? Do not put it in the DHCP pool that we talked about earlier. You want this to be outside of that, something that you're going to know because you're going to have to control it. Finally, on this page, the Class A network. This is something that you do not want to mess with normally, 99.9% of the time. If you are working with a Class C network, a 192.168 network, just leave the Just Add Power devices on a 10. network. No big deal. If you come across a customer's system or office system that's on a 10. network already, a Class A, you will get a warning telling you it's going to put it on a Class B network. Not a big deal. You only get to work with 32,000 devices. So for the most part, that's not a problem. Here it shows you where to plug the devices in. Port 1, no matter what switch it is, port 1 always goes back to your customer's network, your control system, the network that your control system is on. Port 2, the red, ours is, is where you plug the transmitters in. And one thing I'm going to talk about is if you, here, you can see we have extra ports and customers never change their minds, I always recommend adding an extra transmitter or two into the system. This way, it alleviates any problems of coming back 6 months down the line when a customer wants to add some sources. You would have to unplug those receivers and move them down the row. It's not really much of a problem here on a little 2x2 system, but if you're working with like 7 transmitters and maybe 13 or 14 receivers, that can become a problem if you get them out of line. And if you program your control system, you can mess up your programming in your control system. So I always say to add an extra transmitter or two here. Next, this is where your receivers are that plug them in. And then finally, these ports here are extra ports. Can you use them for other devices? Yes. Only after you've finished setting up the Just Add Power system. You do not want anything else plugged into any other ports while setting up Jad Config and running Jad Config. But after that, you got plenty of PoE power. You can put access points in them, but they have to go into the yellow ports. Those are the ones that are set up on VLAN 0 that share the same VLAN as port 1. Next, it goes out and scans for the devices, sees the devices, and configures the devices, sets the IP addresses of the transmitters and receivers, updates the firmware to the devices, and makes them current. Finally, for Jad Config, this is the final page of the Just Add Power system. There's an important thing here for communicating. If you are only doing audio-video switching and you don't care about any of the other features of Just Add Power, you are finished. But if you want to have access or send RS-232 commands or video wall or CEC controls, you need to set up a static route. For the most part, here we show how to set up a static route in a Luxel router. Just Add Power's tech support is fantastic if you are too afraid to set up a static route, or Luxel's tech support. Both know how to set up static routes. but this essentially is a communication to route those commands on that 10 dot network to the Just Add Power devices. And this static route has to be there for you to have access on your 192 network to see those. Something, again, very simple and easy to add. You literally copy it verbatim from the final page of the Jad config up there, and then store it, hit apply and reboot the router, and that static route has taken effect. So basically, there's one other button for setting up with Just Add Power, is testing the system. You can test and make sure that the system is working correctly without a control system using the Jad config. The test button on the Jad config opens up, asks you for the IP address of that Luxel switch, again, asks you for what Luxel switch you're working with, and then we'll open up a grid, and this shows you the inputs and the outputs of that system. You can just click on the grid and it does the switching for you without having a control system in there. This is just for testing purposes. This is not for to be left for a end user. Almost done. This was a new feature added for this in the 6.5 firmware. It's called Switch Please. Allows you to control a Just Add Power system without having to use a control system. So this is set up within the Just Add Power transmitters and receivers, and allows you to specify user names, or displays, source names, and so on, and does image pull through that. So if you have a web browser, doesn't matter if it's Firefox, Chrome, Explorer, any browser, you can do Switch Please with that. And again, this is a new feature that was added with 6.5 firmware, and you can control it. Now, doesn't do volume control, doesn't do video wall, any of that, but for the most part of just controlling and moving from sources to different displays, works fantastic. Some of the locations that Just Add Power is installed at and in. Obviously Nike main events across the country, very large installs. Here in the state of Texas, Pluckers, Twin Peaks, some of the other locations around, but you'll find it Buffalo Wild Wings, different Buffalo Wild Wings across the country. Miami International Airport's probably one of the largest, almost 1,000 displays done with Just Add Power at MIA. Finally, 3-year warranty on the devices. It is an advanced replacement, but it is imperative we want the device back in with a advanced replacement. There is a return shipping label for that busted device. We want that back as soon as possible, so please make sure integrators and dealers send that back to us. And just to give you an idea, so the evolution of Ultra HD IP, the various things that we do and that firmware updates have enabled for the devices, from video wall to image pull, image push, 3D capabilities, HDR10 support, USB 2.0 over IP, just by updating firmware and the different things that we were able to do with the firmware of the devices. And here is just a look and understanding of the interface into a transmitter receiver on the system. We can see the image pull on the actual web interface. This is also another cool feature that allows integrators to have remote access into a system and verify that there is video going across the system and see that a source is transmitting video, that a display can see the video. We can see the EDID information, the formats, the resolution of what's going on here with that. Finally, with Just Add Power, there is a full 2-day hand-on training in Florida. Again, they're located in Largo, Florida. If you ever have the opportunity, it is a beautiful place to go. Fly in on a Wednesday. Thursday and Friday are full training days, hands-on, putting devices together, programming it, learning the different features and how it works with control systems. Welcome to attend. And that's what we have. So thank you very much, guys, for sitting through another training. So y'all have a good evening.